The porch light flickered again. Garrett Mathers noticed it as he poured the morning coffee. Half cup, no sugar. Always the same. Always silent. The soft drip, drip, drip of the kitchen faucet competed with the light rain tapping on the windows, both marking time in a house that hadn't changed in 3 years, since Laurel passed. The coffee burned a little going down, but he welcomed it. It was honest. Bitter. Predictable. He stood at the kitchen sink, mug in hand, watching the front yard slowly soak under the gray curtain of dawn. The mailbox leaned a little too far left again. He should fix that. Maybe today. "Dad?" The voice was small, tired. Garrett turned. Eli, all messy curls and oversized pajamas, stood rubbing his eyes at the edge of the hallway. "You're up early, bud. Had the dream again." Garrett didn't ask which one, just crossed the room, knelt, and pulled his son into his arms. "I know," he whispered into the boy's hair. "I'm here." The clock ticked on the wall behind them. 6:23. Garrett ruffled Eli's hair and pointed to the counter. "Go on, cereal's waiting. I even remembered the marshmallows this time." Eli offered a weak smile and padded over, dragging his blanket like a cape behind him. Garrett opened the fridge, took out the milk, and there it was again. Flick, flick. He paused, squinted through the window above the sink. The porch light danced. Once more. And then he saw it. A shadow. No. 3. One taller, standing stiff, uncertain, 2 smaller, clinging on either side like bookends to grief. Garrett blinked hard. The taller figure stepped forward just enough for the light to catch her face. Pale, soaked hair clinging to her cheeks. She clutched a small suitcase in one hand, the other resting protectively on one girl's shoulder. The children's coats were mismatched, too thin for this weather. And then she looked up, directly into the kitchen window, eyes hollow but pleading. Garrett didn't move. The mug in his hand cooled, forgotten. Eli's spoon clinked against the bowl behind him. "Dad? There's someone on the—" "I see them," Garrett said, voice low. He set the mug down carefully and walked to the door. Each step felt like a chapter, turning in a book he didn't remember writing. The moment he opened it, the scent of wet earth and something older, fear maybe, rushed in. "Can I help you?" he asked, blinking into the rain. The woman hesitated, then held out a wrinkled envelope. "To Garrett Mathers," it read in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. "No return address." I was told this was the place," she said, her accent gentle, unsure. "Your brother, Ethan. He sent for me." Garrett froze. Ethan had died 9 months ago. He looked at the envelope, then at her again. The rain made rivulets down her cheeks like tears. One of the girls, identical twins, maybe 7, sneezed. He didn't know what to say. The words had all flown out the back of his throat and into the sky somewhere. She bowed her head, ashamed. "I didn't know where else to go. I'm sorry." A long breath passed between them. Finally, Garrett stepped aside. "Come in. You're soaked." The twins hesitated until the woman touched their backs gently. Together, they shuffled inside. As they crossed the threshold, Garrett caught a glimpse of their shoes. Just socks, no soles, worn, threadbare. One carried a stuffed elephant, missing its ear. He shut the door behind them. The porch light flickered once more, then steadied, and somewhere deep in Garrett's chest, something stirred, like an old song he hadn't heard in years, waiting to be remembered. The envelope sat on the kitchen table like it didn't belong there. Creased, watermarked, but intact. A ghost in paper form. Garrett turned it over twice before sliding his finger under the seal. The woman, Lilia, she'd said her name was, stood silently across from him, wringing out her shawl into the sink. The twins sat side by side on the wooden bench, feet not touching the ground, coats still on, hands folded in their laps like little statues. Eli perched on the bottom stair behind them, watching like he'd walked into the middle of a movie he didn't understand. Garrett cleared his throat and unfolded the letter. It was Ethan's handwriting. Gar, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I know what you're thinking. What the hell did I do now? I found her, brother. She's real. And she's in trouble. I tried everything to get her here before it was too late. I paid the agency. I covered the paperwork. But my heart gave out faster than the plan could finish. If she makes it to your door, she has nowhere else. Help her. Help them. She didn't come for money. She came for a future. E. Garrett exhaled slowly. The paper trembled in his hands. Or maybe that was just him. He folded it once, placed it gently on the table, and looked up at her. You knew Ethan? Lilia nodded once, her eyes searching his face like she was waiting for a verdict. He wrote to me, for months, said he would bring us here. Then the letters stopped. She reached into her small bag and pulled out a manila folder, laying it beside the envelope. Inside, immigration papers, sponsorship documents, a notarized letter from Ethan, all in order, all legal, all unfinished. I was still in Manila when he died, she said softly. But by then, I had no home left, no safe place. Garrett leaned back in the chair. The old wood creaked. He ran a hand over his beard and glanced at the twins. They were staring at the fridge, at the faded photo of Laurel, Eli, and Garrett, at a 4th of July picnic 5 years ago. Before cancer. Before the silence. You don't have to stay, she said suddenly. Her voice clipped with fear. If this is too much, I understand. I will not burden you. I only needed a place for the night. Garrett looked at her. Really looked. The rain had soaked through her dress. Her hands were cracked, dry. She looked like someone who had spent years being useful to people who never saw her. He didn't know what to say. He wasn't good with strangers or messes or women who carried more grief than he could hold. But he could offer one thing. Stay, he said finally, glancing toward the hallway. The guest room's clean, just for now, till we figure things out. Lilia didn't move, but something in her shoulders released. Thank you, she whispered. Eli came forward quietly, dragging a blanket. They can have my bunk bed, he offered. I'll camp with Dad. Garrett gave him a small nod, proud in a way he couldn't put words to. They all moved like shadows up the stairs. Lilia carrying the suitcase, the twins trailing behind her, one still clutching that floppy-eared elephant. Garrett stood in the kitchen, alone again. He stared at Ethan's letter, then at the contract inside the folder. Mail order bride. That's what people called it. Like a package. But nothing about that woman felt packaged. She felt broken. Like someone who had survived the storm and washed up on his porch by accident. And now she was in the room down the hall, with 2 daughters who didn't speak, and a past that hadn't caught up to them yet. The rain pressed against the windows like a memory. Garrett poured himself a second cup of coffee. Black, no sugar, and stood at the window again. The porch light glowed steady. No more flickering. Just the hum of something beginning. Something he hadn't asked for, something he wasn't sure he deserved, but still, it had arrived and stayed. Garrett stirred the chili slowly, his mind half on the pot, half on the upstairs hallway. The sounds had quieted. No more rustling bags or tentative footsteps. Just stillness. Stillness was easy for him. Familiar. Like an old coat he wore since, Laurel passed. But tonight, the house wasn't just quiet. It was waiting. Eli entered the kitchen barefoot, dragging a pillow and wearing a t-shirt with a dinosaur whose mouth had long since faded in the wash. "Are they coming down?" "Soon," Garrett said, checking the cornbread in the oven. "You remember how to be nice to guests?" "I remember how to be nice to scared people," Eli said simply. Then added, "They're not going to talk much, are they?" Garrett paused, unsure how to answer. The floor creaked softly. Then 3 figures appeared at the edge of the doorway. Lilia, now wearing one of Laurel's old cardigans, stood with her hands folded neatly. The twins stood close beside her, one slightly hiding behind the other. "Dinner's ready," Garrett said, gesturing to the table. Lilia gave a small nod and guided the girls forward. They sat gently on the edge of the bench, their tiny hands folded, as if expecting instructions or permission. Garrett set down bowls, one by one. "Hope you're okay with chili," he said, trying not to sound like he was trying. "It's warm," Lilia said quietly. "Thank you." He handed the last bowl to Ava. He thought it was Ava. She had the ribbon, and noticed the way her fingers trembled just slightly. Not from cold, from something deeper. Eli sat across from her, his own bowl steaming. "You can dunk the cornbread in it," he offered casually, breaking a piece in half. "Makes it less spicy." The twins stared at him, then copied the motion with near-perfect precision. Across the table, Lilia noticed and exhaled, just slightly. For a moment, they all ate, spoonfuls, small bites, no words. Then Eli asked the question, "So, do you guys like music?" The twins blinked. Garrett looked at him sideways, amused. "That's your go-to dinner question?" "Well, yeah," Eli shrugged. "Mom used to say music makes strangers into maybe friends." Lilia smiled, soft, then gone. But it was there. "I used to sing," she said quietly. "Before." "Before what?" She didn't say. She didn't need to. Garrett changed the subject. "If you want, I can show you the piano sometime. It's old, out in the garage. Came with the house. Mostly collects dust and spiders now." The twins' eyes flicked up, wide and curious. One gave the faintest nod. Progress. After dinner, as Garrett cleared the dishes, he noticed something under the table. A small scrap of paper, wrinkled and smeared. He picked it up. A drawing. 5 stick figures holding hands. 1 tall. 1 medium. 3 small. He looked closer. The figures had names scribbled beneath in shaky handwriting. Mom, me, sister, Mr. Ethan, and other man. His throat tightened. He didn't know which one he was supposed to be. He tucked the drawing in his pocket. Later, while washing the dishes, Lilia stepped beside him with a towel in hand. "I can help. You're a guest. Then teach me how to be something else." The water ran over their hands in the silence between words. Eli showed the twins the bookshelf before bed. Picked his favorite, The Littlest Engine. They listened, wide-eyed, while he read from memory, sitting cross-legged on the rug. Garrett stood in the hallway, watching. Something about the shape of it, Eli's voice, the girls leaning in. Lilia curled on the arm of the sofa, quiet but close. Looked almost like family. Not quite, but maybe the ghost of it. As he turned off the kitchen light for the night, Garrett noticed the porch light still glowing steady. For the first time in a long time, it felt like someone might be watching over them, even if it was just his brother. Morning sunlight crept through the curtains like it was afraid to wake anyone. Garrett stood at the bottom of the stairs, listening. The house wasn't loud. It never was. But now it was careful. The kind of quiet that didn't come from peace, but practice. He found Lilia already in the kitchen, scrubbing the stovetop like it had wronged her. "You don't have to do that," he said gently. She didn't look up. It was dirty. "It's Tuesday." She paused, confused. "Yes? I clean the kitchen on Tuesdays. It's tradition." Her hands slowed, then stopped. "I didn't know," she whispered, stepping back. Garrett picked up a dish towel, unsure how to soften what he'd just said. "I'm kidding, Lilia. You don't have to earn your place here." Her face said she didn't believe him. The twins were in the living room, arranging couch pillows into a sort of tiny fortress. Ava flinched when one fell with a thud on the floor. "It's okay," Eli said from the rug, where he was building Lego spaceships. "Loud noises don't get you in trouble here." She didn't answer. Neither did her sister. Instead, both quietly reset the pillow, exactly as it had been. Garrett leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. He'd seen this before, not in children, but in dogs that had been yelled at too often. The way they walked on eggshells even in safe places. He stepped into the room and sat beside Eli. "Movie night tonight?" he asked casually. Eli grinned. "Popcorn and bad animation?" "Always." He looked to the girls. "You like movies?" They exchanged a glance. Then Amira, the quieter one, whispered, "Are they allowed?" Garrett blinked. "They're invited," he said slowly. Lilia was behind him now, drying her hands. She'd heard it too. Her expression didn't change, but something in her shoulders drooped. Later that afternoon, Garrett returned from the hardware store to find Lilia scrubbing the bathroom tiles, on her knees, using a toothbrush. "Lilia," he said, not unkindly, "why are you doing this?" She kept her eyes down. The grout was discolored. "You could have just told me. I was raised to fix what I notice, and to be useful, or be replaced." He said nothing, just watched her for a long time. "You're not a contract," he said finally. She looked at him for the first time in the entire conversation. Not at his feet, not at the wall, at him. "No one's told me that before," she said. That night, Garrett made spaghetti, because it was simple, and because it was messy. The twins hesitated when Eli twirled his noodles and made a goofy sound. They looked at Lilia. Lilia hesitated too, then gave the slightest nod. Ava tried it. Got sauce on her chin. Garrett grinned. "Now, that's the proper way to eat noodles." Eli slapped the table. "Dad once sneezed so hard, he flung spaghetti on the ceiling. It stayed up there for 2 weeks." Garrett raised an eyebrow. "Thanks for the testimony, counselor." The girls laughed. Quietly. But it was real. Lilia watched them. She wasn't smiling yet, but she wasn't apologizing either. Later, Garrett passed the girls' room and saw Lilia carefully folding their clothes into perfect little stacks. Military tight, corners, everything precise. He knocked gently on the doorframe. "You know, it's okay if they mess up the dresser. They're kids." "I know," she said softly. "It's not for them. It's for me." She sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded. I was trained to take up less space, to be neat, to be silent. I'm trying to learn something different here." Garrett didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped into the room, bent slightly, and pulled open the drawer. He messed up the stack. Not all of it. Just enough that one sleeve stuck out crooked. He looked at her. "You'll learn," he said, "one drawer at a time." She stared at the mess like it was a mountain, then let out the smallest breath of a laugh. It wasn't much, but it was enough. That night, the twins climbed onto the couch between Garrett and Lilia, holding small bowls of popcorn. When the first fart joke landed in the movie, Eli howled with laughter. Ava and Amira blinked, then giggled, then laughed until they snorted. Garrett didn't move. He just listened to the sound. Not loud, but no longer afraid. The garage always smelled like sawdust, motor oil, and the past. Garrett never did get around to fixing it up properly. Tools lined the pegboard like forgotten soldiers, and spiderwebs clung to the corners with stubborn loyalty. It wasn't a place for guests, but it was where the piano lived. It sat beneath an old sheet, slumped against the wall like a weary traveler. Garrett had hauled it there after Laurel passed, thinking maybe one day Eli would learn to play. But the house got quieter, and the piano got dustier. Until today. Eli tugged at Ava's sleeve. "Want to see something weird?" She hesitated. Then nodded. Amira followed, always a breath behind her sister. Garrett opened the garage door, letting in a wash of sunlight and cool morning air. "Watch your step," he warned, nudging aside a bucket. Eli pulled off the sheet with a dramatic flourish. "Ta-da! This used to be my mom's." The piano was chipped, scratched near the edges, and two keys didn't spring back quite right. But it looked like it remembered songs. Ava reached out slowly, almost reverently. Her finger hovered above the ivory key, then pressed. A note rang out. Thin, soft, but whole. She jumped slightly at the sound. Garrett watched from the doorway. Lilia stood beside him, barefoot on the cold concrete, arms wrapped around herself. "She's never touched one before," Lilia whispered. "Really? There were no instruments where we lived, only rules." Inside the garage, Eli hit two. "Notes, then another. Try this," he said, playing the simple do-re-mi run. Amira mimicked it, slower, more delicate. The note stuck on the E. Eli jiggled the key. "Oops, that one's cranky," Ava laughed. Amira grinned. Then, without warning, Amira began to hum. It wasn't loud, just a soft, winding thread of melody. Garrett turned to Lilia. Her face had gone still. "She sings?" he asked quietly. "She did," Lilia replied, her voice barely audible. "Before things?" The tune grew clearer. It wasn't any song Garrett recognized. It didn't belong to a movie or a show or a nursery rhyme. It was something older. A song remembered from a time before fear. Then Lilia stepped forward and joined them. Her voice came low, at first like a whisper into water, but then deeper, fuller. The twins paused, surprised, then smiled. Garrett leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. He hadn't heard a woman sing in this house in over 3 years, not since Laurel. But this wasn't a replacement. This was something else. Something becoming. Heidi played until the sun shifted across the floor. Dust floated like glitter in the beams of light. And for one rare, fragile hour, the garage felt like a cathedral. Later that evening, Garrett stirred soup at the stove while Lilia wiped down the table, humming softly. Same tune. No words. Just Warmth. You sound like someone who had a record deal, Garrett teased. Lilia smiled without turning. I sound like someone who was once a girl with dreams, then a woman with children, then a woman who stopped singing. He tasted the soup. You've still got it. She didn't answer, but she hummed a little louder. That night, after the girls fell asleep, curled together like mirror images, Garrett sat on the porch, an old mug of tea in his hands. Lilia joined, him silently, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. I haven't sung in front of anyone since Manila, she said. You should do it more, Garrett replied. I used to believe my voice could save me. And now? I think maybe it can save them. A beat of quiet passed between them. Then Garrett said, We'll fix the piano. Might need new strings. Lilia nodded. And a stool that doesn't wobble. Deal. The porch light buzzed. Overhead, warm and steady. Inside, Amira stirred in her sleep, still humming. And outside, beneath a sky thick with stars, a man and a woman sat beside each other, not touching, but not alone. And in the space between them, a melody took root. The attic wasn't meant for guests. It was the kind of place where time sat heavy. The pull-string light buzzed weakly as Lilia stepped inside, her arms full of folded sheets. She'd offered to find extra blankets, insisted, really, and Garrett, caught between distraction and habit, had pointed up. Now she stood in the dim space above the house, where dust and silence made their home. Boxes stacked like forgotten monuments lined the walls. Some were labeled in faded Sharpie. Christmas, baby stuff, garage sale, maybe. But most had no label at all. Only dust, tape, and time. Lilia set down the blankets on a nearby trunk and moved cautiously. The floor creaked beneath her bare feet. The air smelled like cedar and something older. Paper? Memory? One box sat slightly open in the corner. The lid caved in as if someone once meant to go through it, and then never did. She hesitated, but something pulled her forward. Inside, a worn, stuffed giraffe with one eye missing, a hospital bracelet with Eli Mathers printed in small, smeared font, a lock of hair in a sealed envelope, and a photo album. Lilia lifted it gently, brushing off the dust. The cover read, Our First Years. She opened it slowly. There was Garrett. Much younger, a little thinner, grinning beside a woman with copper-red curls and eyes like a sunrise. Laurel. There was Eli, fresh and pink and screaming in a hospital bassinet. Laurel holding him like he was made of stars. Garrett asleep on the couch with Eli on his chest, his mouth open mid-snore. Page after page, Lilia flipped through someone else's joy, her fingers trembling just slightly. She paused at a photo of Laurel standing barefoot in the kitchen, flour on her cheeks, holding a loaf of banana bread like a trophy. Someone, probably Garrett, had written on the back, She burned the first two, ate them anyway. Lilia smiled, and then she saw it. Tucked between pages, a folded piece of paper, handwritten. Not a photo. A letter. She read the first line. If something happens to me. Lilia stopped. This wasn't hers to read. With reverence, she refolded it, placed it back exactly where it had been, and closed the album. She returned everything gently to the box, pressing the lid down with a quiet, steady hand. Some memories weren't meant to be unpacked by strangers, but she understood them. Deeply. Because she, too, had left boxes behind in her own past. Except Hers were filled with bruises, broken promises, and the ache of running while carrying children in her arms. As she stood to leave, her eyes caught another open crate, this one full of fabric, old scarves, swaddles, baby clothes. She reached in and pulled out a soft blue scarf embroidered with tiny gold stars. It was still warm somehow. Later that evening, Eli bounded into the living room. "Dad! Ava won't give me back my comic." "Wait, never mind." He paused mid-stride. Ava stood in the center of the room, gently wrapping that same starry scarf around her neck. She didn't speak, just looked down at it like it was something sacred. Lilia stood nearby, unsure. "She found it in the attic. Should I have said no?" Garrett stepped forward slowly. "No," he said, voice thick. "That was Laurel's favorite." Ava looked up at him, eyes soft, unafraid. Then crossed the room, placed a hand on his wrist, and hugged him. Quick, gentle, like a whisper. Garrett didn't move. Then slowly, his arms wrapped around her small shoulders. She smelled like apples and dust. Lilia stood at the edge of the scene, her hands clutched to her chest. Garrett met her eyes across the room. "You've got a gift," he said. She blinked. "I only gave her a scarf." "No," he said. "You gave her permission." That night, while putting the girls to bed, Lilia tucked the scarf under Ava's pillow. The twins clung to each other like always, but for the first time, they didn't. Whisper after the lights went out. They just rested. Downstairs, Garrett pulled a dusty record player from the hall closet. Laurel's old one. He placed a vinyl on the spindle and turned it on. A warm crackle filled the air. Then the piano began, a soft, dreamy ballad. Lilia sat beside him, on the couch, blanket over her knees. "Music again," she said. "House forgot how to sing for a while," Garrett replied. "You helped it remember." Outside, the porch light stayed lit. Inside, the attic above held its breath. But now, it held something softer, too. Hope, and the quiet hum of lives starting over. Saturday came dressed in sunshine and good intentions. Garrett suggested they get out of the house. Groceries, snacks for movie night, maybe a stop at the farmer's market. It was the first time since Lilia and the twins had arrived that they'd all go out together. He wasn't sure what made him offer. Maybe the way Amira had started singing quietly while brushing her teeth. Maybe the way Ava smiled now without checking first. Maybe the way Lilia had laughed, really laughed, when Eli dropped a pancake and called it floor cake. Whatever it was, it felt like a small step back into life. The girls wore matching cardigans, Eli's idea, and Garrett gave them each $5 to spend on anything not alive or illegal. They smiled. It felt like a win. The grocery store was just a few miles from home, tucked between a hardware shop and an old donut place that still used real sugar glaze. Garrett grabbed a cart. Eli rode on the front like he was steering a spaceship. Lilia and the girls trailed behind, marveling at the cereal aisle like it was a museum of colors. It was almost normal, until it wasn't. They were waiting at the checkout when it happened. Garrett was unloading apples and frozen peas when a man 2 lanes over turned suddenly. He was tall, unshaven, maybe mid-40s. His eyes landed on Lilia, then locked. His whole face changed. Recognition sharpened into something cruel. "Lilia?" She froze. The twins clutched her legs instantly, like magnets to steel. The man took 2 steps forward. "Didn't think I'd see you here," he sneered. Ran off with the kids, huh? Thought you could just vanish? Garrett turned, one hand, still on the basket. Excuse me? The man ignored him. Still pretending to be the saintly little mail-order angel? Lilia's lips parted, but no sound came out. The checkout girl paused mid-scan. Customers stopped behind them. A small crowd began to form, curiosity stretching its fingers. Garrett stepped between them. That's enough. The man laughed bitterly. And who are you? Next fool she conned? I'm the man who will call the police if you take one more step. The man's jaw twitched. Go home, Garrett said, voice low. You don't get to speak to her. Not now. Not ever again. There was something in Garrett's tone, steady, rooted, that made even the manager glance over. The man scoffed, spit on the ground, and walked away. Lilia hadn't moved. Neither had the twins. Garrett looked at the checkout girl. Can you finish this up? We need to go. She nodded silently. They didn't speak on the drive home. Eli sat between the twins in the back seat, holding their hands. No one asked him to. Lilia stared out the window the entire way, eyes fixed on nothing, mouth pressed thin. She didn't cry. That made it worse. When they got home, Garrett brought the bags in. Lilia followed him into the kitchen like a ghost. He found me, she whispered. Garrett turned. Who was he? My husband, she said. Not on paper, but in every way that mattered. The man who bought me when I was 18. Garrett froze. Lilia continued, voice flat. He paid the agency, called it a marriage, but it was a contract, one where I didn't own my own hours, or my own body. She looked at him now. The girls, they don't remember the worst of it. I left when I saw bruises on Ava's arm. She'd only dropped a cup. Her hands shook. I ran. Ethan helped me escape, sent money, arranged the visa, but he died before I made it. She paused. I thought maybe here we could disappear. Garrett's voice was quiet. You don't have to disappear. She blinked. What if he reports me? You didn't kidnap your daughters. You saved them. She shook her head. That kind of man doesn't need truth to destroy someone. He just needs power. Garrett stepped closer. Well, he doesn't have any power here. Lilia looked at him, trembling. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Because someone needs to, Garrett said. And maybe it should have been me from the start. She looked down, then back up. I was so afraid you'd send us away. I should have done more, he said. For Ethan, for you. But I didn't know. Now I do. Silence stretched between them, full of broken glass and healing stitches. I'll keep you safe, Garrett said finally. That's not a promise. That's a decision. Lilia nodded, just once, but it was enough. That night, Garrett didn't sleep. He sat on the porch with a baseball bat by the door, just in case. But nothing came. Only the wind, only the stars, only the soft hum of safety settling in. Rain returned the next morning, gentle, steady, rhythmic, like the sky remembered how to cry without screaming. Garrett sat at the dining table with his second cup of coffee going cold. The girls were still upstairs, curled in their blankets. Eli had built a pillow fort in the living room and declared it a sadness-free zone, complete with chocolate chip tribute snacks. Lilia had not spoken since breakfast. The silence in the house was not uncomfortable, but it was dense. Like everyone was walking through water. Garrett reached for the manila envelope Ethan had sent, still on the bookshelf where he left it the first night Lilia arrived. He hadn't opened the rest of the papers. There were more than just immigration forms inside. He pulled it open now. Inside were several pages, some printed, some handwritten, and 3 small envelopes, each with a name in Ethan's cursive: Lilia, Ava, Amira. Garrett froze. He didn't open them. He couldn't. Instead, he focused on the last folded sheet, a letter addressed simply, "Gar, if you never see me again." He unfolded it slowly, the paper soft with age, corners worn. "Gar, I know I wasn't much of a brother for a long time, always chasing some project or plan like it would fix me. But this one matters. Her name is Lilia. She's not just a match or a favor. She's a person who's lived through things I can't even begin to understand. I saw something in her I hadn't seen in a long time. Fight. Not the kind that makes noise. The kind that survives. She's got 2 little girls. And they're watching everything. If she comes to you, don't ask why she didn't have a better plan. Just be the better plan. You're steady, Gar. You're the one who stays. I couldn't. My heart won't let me. But maybe yours will. If she knocks, open the door. If she stays, protect them like you would me." Don Garrett didn't notice the tears until they darkened the paper. He folded it again. Tighter. Tighter still. Then he walked to the kitchen, grabbed a plastic bag, and carefully sealed the 3 letters with names on them. He placed them in the top drawer of his desk, someplace safe, but not far. Some things weren't ready to be opened, but they were ready to be kept. Later that afternoon, Lilia found him on the porch with the letter still in his lap. "I didn't know Ethan wrote to you," she said quietly. Garrett looked up. "He wrote a lot more than I thought. Some of it's yours, for when you're ready." She stepped forward, slow, uncertain. "Can I sit?" "Always." She sat beside him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. The rain tapped the tin roof gently overhead. "He never told me about you," she said. "Just that you were the better one." Garrett snorted. "He was wrong." "No," she said. "He wasn't." They sat in silence. Just the rain. Just breath. Just time. "I think I loved him," she said at last. "Not like romance, but like someone who saw me, who gave me a way out." Garrett nodded. He had a way of seeing the broken parts, and not flinching. "I miss him," she whispered. "And I barely knew him." "I miss him too," Garrett replied. "And I knew him too well." Inside, Ava sat on the staircase drawing again. Crayons spread across the step, knees tucked beneath her. She paused, then carefully sketched 5 stick figures in a line. A man, a woman, 2 girls, a boy. She drew hearts around them this time. She labeled the tallest one Mr. Ethan, then erased it and wrote Mr. Garrett. That night, as Lilia tucked the twins in, Amira looked up at her and whispered, "Can we stay?" Lilia paused. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Not just here. I mean, with him, with Mr. Garrett." Lilia's heart folded in on itself. "I don't know, baby," she said honestly. "That's a big question." "Okay," Amira whispered, curling into her pillow. "But I hope the answer is yes." Garrett sat at his desk later, the letter still beside him. He took out a pen and wrote his own, not to Ethan, not to Lilia, but to the future. "If they choose to stay, I will build something worth staying for." Then he folded the page, placed it with Ethan's, side by side. 2 voices, 2 promises, and, maybe, the beginning of something neither of them got to finish. The calendar said it was Tuesday. Ordinary, gray, uneventful, But Eli noticed it first. "Dad," he said softly over cereal, "the girls said today is their birthday." Garrett paused mid-pour, milk hovering over his coffee. "Both of them?" Eli nodded. "Same day. They're twins, remember?" Garrett blinked. "Right." He looked toward the living room, where Ava and Amira sat quietly with sketch pads. No giggles, no hints, no birthday glow. Just silence. Lilia was at the sink, rinsing out the breakfast bowls. Her eyes looked tired, not from sleep, but from remembering too much. Garrett approached gently. "Did you know?" She didn't turn around. "I forgot," she whispered. She dropped the sponge in the sink and braced herself against the counter. "I had it marked in Manila. But then the running and the visas and Ethan and the man at the store." Her breath hitched. "They've never had a real birthday," she said. "We never stayed anywhere long enough. I told myself we'd do something next year. Then, next year, never came." Garrett laid a hand gently on her shoulder. "Then let's give them one now." Lilia shook her head. "We don't even have balloons, no gifts, no cake. We have a kitchen," Garrett said, "and scissors, and a little time before lunch." He turned to Eli. "Operation Secret Birthday. You in?" Eli grinned. "Let's do this." Garrett pulled flour, eggs, sugar, and chocolate chips from the cupboard. Lilia stood frozen at first, unsure if she was allowed to join. Then she grabbed an apron and tied it like a lifeline. Eli cut construction paper into crooked stars and taped them to the living room wall. He hung socks from the fireplace mantel and labeled them birthday stockings. He built a crown out of cereal box cardboard and old pipe cleaners. "Every queen needs a crown," he said. Lilia mixed the batter by hand, her fingers coated in sugar and memory. Garrett showed her how to preheat the oven, without scaring it, and she smiled, genuinely, for the first time all morning. The smell of chocolate filled the house. Garrett found an old music box Laurel used to keep in the hallway cupboard. It played a soft waltz, slightly off tune, but sweet. He wound it up and placed it on the table beside two cupcakes, now topped with broken birthday candles dug out from a forgotten drawer. The girls were still drawing when Lilia called out gently, "Come, here, my loves." They approached cautiously, then stopped. The paper stars, the cupcakes, the handmade crowns, the music box spinning its little broken song. For a moment, neither moved. Ava's eyes filled first. Amira followed. Not loud sobs, but silent, stunned tears. "We forgot," Ava whispered. "No," Lilia said, kneeling. "I forgot." But Garrett remembered, and Eli helped. The girls looked up at Garrett. "We don't have presents," Amira murmured. Garrett knelt beside them and placed the crowns gently on their heads. "You are the presents." Then he nodded toward the table. "Make a wish." They did, together. And for the first time, when they blew out candles, someone clapped. After lunch, Garrett stepped onto the porch and found a small drawing tucked into his boot. 5 stick figures again. This time, the tallest had a beard. A speech bubble above him read, "Welcome home." Later that night, Lilia found Garrett in the kitchen, washing dishes quietly. She didn't speak at first, just stepped beside him and took the towel. "Thank you," she said. "For what? For knowing how to make a day matter?" He smiled. "It's a gift." She looked down. "You don't even know them." "I'm getting there," he said. "One drawing at a time." She paused. "Today was the first day. They didn't ask me if we'd be leaving soon." Garrett looked at her. "What did you say?" "I told them I don't know yet. But I want to." He dried his hands and leaned against the counter. "You don't owe me anything, Lilia." "I know," she said, "but I might want to give you something anyway." He raised an eyebrow. "What?" She smiled. "A reason to keep baking cupcakes." That night, the twins slept with their crowns on. The music box played once more before winding down. And somewhere in the back of the house, Ethan's picture sat on the mantel watching quietly, as if saying, This is what I hoped for." The porch swing had been broken for years, a rotten board, one missing chain, and a stubborn tilt that always left it leaning right like it favored bad posture. Laurel used to joke, it matched Garrett's back. He never fixed it. Never had a reason to, but now he did. Garrett stood out front with a toolbox, the morning sun casting long shadows across the dusty planks. Spring had finally arrived, cautiously, like it didn't want to interrupt anything. Lilia stood barefoot on the steps, mug in hand. The girls were still inside, finishing their cereal. Eli sat cross-legged nearby, whittling a stick with a butter, knife and narrating his imaginary sword fight in whispers. Garrett examined the swing like it had personally offended him. "You know, this thing was sturdy once." "I believe you," Lilia said, sipping slowly. He pulled the chain taut and winced, as one bolt slipped free. "Okay, maybe not that sturdy," she laughed. "Quiet, but real." He looked over. "You ever fix anything with your hands?" "Only people," she said. "Those are harder," Garrett replied. She stepped off the porch and walked over to where he knelt. "What do you need?" He handed her the socket wrench. "Hold this. Twist counterclockwise. No, other counter." "I only know clockwise," she said. "That's fair. Life mostly spins that way anyway." They worked in silence, the kind that feels like company, not pressure. Garrett replaced the rusted bolt. Lilia held the board in place. When he stood up, dusty and slightly sweating, the swing was level for the first time in years. He gave it a test. It held. "Impressive," she said. "I did the wrenching," he said, settling into the swing. "You did the magic." She hesitated, then sat beside him. The chain creaked gently. The seat swayed. "I never sat on porches before," she said. "Where I'm from, porches are for men. Women stay behind the curtains." "You're here now," Garrett said. "I don't know what to do with that," she whispered. "You don't have to do anything," he said. "Just sit." They swayed for a moment, the swing carrying them in soft rhythm. Garrett glanced sideways. "I always thought I needed to keep moving to feel alive. And now, I think maybe stillness is underrated." Lilia didn't answer, but she didn't get up either. Inside, Ava peeked through the window. "They're sitting," she whispered. Eli nodded. "That means something." Amira squinted. "What?" "I don't know," he said. "But grown-ups don't just sit unless it's important." The twins giggled, then started drawing again, this time a swing with stick figures side by side holding mugs. Later, Garrett oiled the hinges on the screen door, while Lilia swept the porch boards clean. They worked without speaking, like they had done this for years, like their hands knew what to do even before their hearts did. Afterward, Garrett brought out lemonade in mismatched glasses. "You could teach a workshop," he said. "Sweeping as meditation." "I was just sweeping," she replied. "Exactly." She smiled. Then, more quietly, "Why are you being so kind to me?" Garrett shrugged. "Because kindness was the only thing that ever worked on me." She looked down at her glass. "Most people only offer kindness when they want something in return." He shook his head. "Not here." She hesitated. "I don't know how to be loved like that." "You'll learn," he said. "One porch at a time. That evening, they sat on the swing again. The girls curled up with books on the steps. Eli wrote in his secret journal, which he insisted wasn't a diary. A breeze lifted Lilia's hair gently. Garrett leaned back, letting the swing creak beneath him. "Porch is fixed," he said. She looked over at him. "So is something else," she replied. He didn't ask what. He didn't need to. The porch light clicked on automatically. But it wasn't the light that warmed them. It was the company, the stillness, the choice to stay. It happened on a Thursday. No storm, no warning. Just a knock. Not frantic, not angry. Just firm. Official. Garrett was halfway through folding laundry when Eli called out, "Dad, there's a lady on the porch. She has a clipboard." He paused, looked out the window. A woman stood with short blonde hair, a state-issued ID clipped to her jacket. Her car sat idling in the driveway, windows up. Garrett's stomach tightened. He stepped onto the porch. The swing swayed behind him. "Can I help you?" he asked. She gave a polite but distant smile. "Mr. Mathers? I'm from Child and Family Services. We received an anonymous concern regarding 2 minors living in your residence. I'd like to ask a few questions." Garrett didn't move. "You mean Ava and Amira?" "That's correct." His hands clenched slightly at his sides. Lilia stepped into the doorway behind him, immediately sensing the tone. Her eyes locked on the woman's badge and froze. "May I come in?" the caseworker asked. Garrett shook his head. "We'll talk out here." She raised an eyebrow. "That's your choice. But I'll need to speak with the children." Lilia's breath hitched. "No, please. They don't do well with strangers. Especially—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Garrett stepped in. "You'll speak with me first. And you're not speaking with them alone." The woman opened her folder. "We received a report alleging the children are not biologically related to you, are possibly undocumented, and may be at risk due to a history of flight." Lilia swayed. Garrett's jaw tightened. "They're safe here." "I'm not here to remove them," the woman said. "Only to verify. You have any idea what your presence does to someone who's been running for years?" She didn't answer. Within the hour, Garrett was on the phone. With the school principal. With Miss Carla, the grocery clerk who always watched the twins while Lilia paid. With Reverend Mason from the community church. People showed up. Fast. One by one, they trickled in. Carla brought cookies, because cookies mean kids live here. The school counselor arrived with the girls' registration papers and artwork. They'd submitted in class, crayon drawings of a house with 5 people. Always 5. Reverend Mason brought a notarized letter. "Garrett's not the kind of man to hide anything," he said. "And those girls? They've started smiling. That's evidence enough for me." The caseworker took notes. She asked questions. She walked through the house, but with each signature, each witness, each drawing on the fridge, the foundation grew harder to shake. Finally, she closed her folder. "I have no immediate concerns. I'll file a positive report. However, I'll need documentation in the coming weeks regarding Lilia's residency status and guardianship claims." Garrett nodded. "We'll provide it." She offered a brief nod, then left. Her car disappeared down the road like a bad dream. Lilia sat on the porch steps, knees tucked to her chest. "They're going to take them," she said. "No, they're not," Garrett replied. "You can't know that. I know the law. And I know this town. And more than anything," he knelt in front of her, "I know you're not the one putting them at risk." She looked up, eyes wet. I'm tired of running. Then stop. I don't know how. Garrett sat beside her. Quiet. You don't have to do it all today, he said. She breathed out slowly. They don't understand that love doesn't come with bloodlines. It comes with casseroles and bedtime songs and knowing who likes which. Crayon color. You're not wrong, Garrett said. She turned to him. You fought for us today. He nodded once. I didn't expect that, she whispered. I didn't expect you, he replied. A silence settled between them, gentle as twilight. Inside, Ava and Amira watched from the window. Ava whispered, He's not afraid of anything. Amira said, He's afraid of losing us. And that made them love him more. Later that night, as Garrett put Eli to bed, the boy looked up and asked, Are they staying? Garrett hesitated. Do you want them to? Eli nodded. Yeah, but only if they want to. Garrett ruffled his hair. That's how it works. Downstairs, Lilia found a drawing tucked into the folds of her shawl. It was from Amira, 5-stick. Figures again, this time holding hands beneath a porch light, and above it, in blocky handwriting, Even when people knock, we are still here. The morning of the school assembly arrived with nervous energy and the scent of cinnamon toast. Eli ate quickly, tapping his spoon against the bowl in a rhythm only he could hear. Ava twirled her braid, distracted, but Amira sat still. Quiet, too quiet, even for her. Garrett noticed. You okay? He asked, pouring orange juice into paper cups. Amira nodded. I'm supposed to sing today. Ah, Garrett said, trying not to overreact. A solo, she nodded again. It's just one song, she said. Miss Clara said I could say no, but I said yes. Garrett lowered himself to one knee beside her. Why? Amira looked up. Because it's a song about home. And I wanted to know how it feels to say that word out loud, with people listening. He nodded slowly, heart thick in his chest. That's a brave thing, Amira, she whispered. It doesn't feel brave. It feels like shaking. That's what brave is, Garrett said. Doing it anyway. The school auditorium buzzed with chatter. Folding chairs scraped against the tiled floor. A bright, homemade banner stretched across the back wall. Spring Showcase. Every voice matters. Garrett sat in the second row with Lilia, Ava, and Eli beside him. Lilia's hands were folded tightly in her lap, lips moving silently, probably a prayer in her native tongue. Ava held her mom's hand and Eli's elbow at the same time. When Amira stepped on stage, something shifted. She wore a simple blue dress, Eli's hand-me-down sneakers, and a look on her face that Garrett had never seen before. Not fear. Focus. Miss. Clara nodded from the side. The music began. Just a soft piano recording. Amira stepped to the microphone, adjusted it, took a breath, and sang. Not loud, not flawless, but whole. Her voice was high and clear, like wind through chimes, fragile, but certain. This is the place my feet can land, where morning knows my name, where songs aren't something. Just pretend, and silence isn't shame. The room stilled. Even the children whispering in the back fell quiet. Lilia's hand flew to her mouth. Ava blinked quickly. Garrett didn't breathe. He watched her. This girl, who once wouldn't speak above a whisper, now filling a room with her voice. Not just sound, but truth. When the final note faded, Amira didn't wait for applause. She simply stepped back, turned, and walked off stage, and the room erupted. not wild clapping, not polite. Thunder. After the show, parents gathered around the snack tables, talking over juice boxes and cupcakes. Eli handed Amira a candy bracelet. "Superstars get sugar," he said. She grinned. "Now you're my sister too," he added matter-of-factly. Ava put her arm around Amira's shoulder. "You always were. Now they know it." Amira looked to Garrett. He nodded once. "You made the ceiling feel like sky today." She blushed. "Is that a poem?" "No," he said. "Just the truth." Later, at home, Lilia tucked the girls in early. Amira clutched the candy bracelet like it was a medal. Lilia leaned in and whispered, "You were brave." "I wanted to run," Amira said. "But you didn't." "No," she smiled, "because I didn't want to leave where I belong." Lilia swallowed the lump in her throat. "You belong here," she whispered back. "Always." Downstairs, Garrett played a soft melody on the old upright piano in the garage. Lilia stood in the doorway, arms crossed loosely. "You don't play often." He didn't look up. "I didn't have a reason." And now, he played the last chord. Now it sounded like something more than memory. Now it sounded like beginning. The first snow didn't come with drama. It arrived quietly, like everything else that mattered in this house. A thin frost on the window panes, a dusting over the porch steps, and that unmistakable stillness in the air, like the whole world was holding its breath. Garrett stood at the kitchen sink with his coffee, watching flakes spiral past the porch light. It was barely morning. The house hadn't fully woken yet. He reached for the thermostat and adjusted it 2 degrees higher. The girls ran cold. Lilia was already at the table, knitting. She'd taught herself from a library book and a few YouTube videos over the last few weeks. She said the repetition helped quiet the memories. Scarves were piling up on the dining room chairs like quiet prayers. "I made a red one for Ava," she said without looking up. "She likes red." Garrett nodded. "And Amira?" "Blue. Sky blue." She said it reminds her of the first time they saw snow out the window. He smiled softly. "And you?" She paused. "Gray. I like gray. It doesn't expect too much." That afternoon, Garrett drove out to the tree lot. Eli, Ava, and Amira danced between rows of pines like it was a forest of green giants. Lilia followed, slowly, watching them with something close to awe, like she still couldn't believe they were allowed to laugh this loudly in public. Garrett picked a tall one, sturdy, but not too wide. "This okay?" he asked. The girls nodded in unison. Eli added, "It's shaped like a triangle. That means it's official." They strapped it to the roof of the truck and drove home, singing off-key Christmas songs, while Lilia laughed so hard she had to cover her face. Garrett didn't join in. He just listened, the kind of listening that fills cracks inside your chest. Back home, they dragged the boxes out of the attic, decorations Laurel had collected over years, some broken, others homemade. Lilia hesitated before opening the first one. "Are you sure?" Garrett nodded. "They're meant to be seen again." Inside were ornaments shaped like animals, felt snowmen with button eyes, glitter-covered popsicle stick stars. Eli held up one shaped like a penguin. "Mom let me eat the glue stick while I made this." Garrett blinked. "Please don't share that part at school." Ava found a small, hand-painted ball with the name Laurel written in cursive. "Was this hers?" Garrett nodded. "She loved this time of year." "Does it make you sad?" "Sometimes," he said. "But this year, it's different." Lilia gently placed the ornament near the top of the tree. We're not replacing her. I know, Garrett said. But maybe we're expanding what family looks like. Later that night, Garrett stepped onto the porch to find a new wreath on the door. Lilia had made it, woven from twigs and ribbon, decorated with dried oranges and little paper stars. In the center was a wooden tag that simply read, Home. He stared at it for a long time, then at the porch swing, at the footprints in the snow, at the glow from inside. Inside, Ava handed him a hand-drawn ornament. 5 stick figures again, now wearing scarves, tiny labels, Garrett, Lilia, Ava, Amira, Eli, and hearts around them all. Garrett's throat tightened. Where do we hang it? Ava pointed to the center of the tree. He nodded. Center it is. That evening, the fire crackled low. The tree shimmered in soft light. The twins dozed off on the couch, curled under one of Lilia's first blankets. Crooked stitches, mismatched yarn, perfect in every way. Eli yawned, eyes half closed. I hope snow stays a long time. Lilia smiled. Winter comes slow, but it teaches patience, Garrett added, and makes the warm places matter more. They didn't speak after that, just sat, together, as flakes fell outside like feathers from some great quiet sky. It began with a cough, not dramatic, not sharp, just a small sound at breakfast, softer than buttered toast. Eli brushed it off. I think I swallowed a snowflake, weird. Lilia chuckled, ruffling his hair. Drink your juice. But by lunchtime, the cough had deepened. By dinner, he couldn't keep anything down. By midnight, he had a fever of 104. Garrett paced the living room, phone pressed to his ear, one hand resting on Eli's damp forehead. Lilia stood beside him, holding the medicine bottle, reading the dosage again and again, like the answer might change. Yes, Garrett said into the phone, voice tight. He's not responding to Tylenol. Breathing shallow. They were in the truck within 10 minutes. The drive to the hospital was quiet. Ava and Amira stayed with Reverend Mason's wife, too sleepy to understand the weight in Garrett's voice when he said, Take care of them like they're yours. Lilia sat in the back seat with Eli, whispering softly, rubbing his back in slow circles. I won't let you go, she said. I won't let you leave this house before you finish teaching Amira how to burp on command. Even sick, Eli smiled, faintly. The ER lights were too bright, the walls too white, the beeping too fast. They hooked Eli up to monitors. An IV. Oxygen. Words were exchanged. Possible pneumonia. Observation. Overnight stay. Garrett signed forms with numb fingers. Lilia didn't leave the room. She sat in the visitor's chair with her knees tucked under her, eyes never leaving the boy in the bed. Garrett stood beside her, arms crossed over his chest, jaw clenched tight. I can't lose him too, he said. She looked up. You won't. You don't know that. I do, she said softly, because I asked the universe not to be that cruel. Garrett exhaled. I already lost Laurel. She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. I'm not her, Lilia said, but I'm here. He squeezed her fingers. That's enough. Hours passed, like years. Eli's fever broke around dawn. His breathing eased. The beeping slowed. Garrett slumped into the chair beside the bed and finally slept. Lilia sat beside him, watching them both. She reached into her bag and pulled out the little music box from the mantel, the one she had been afraid to touch. She placed it gently on the bedside table and wound it once. A soft tune played, a lullaby she didn't know the name of but remembered in her bones. Eli stirred, then smiled. They were discharged 2 days later, wrapped in scarves and cautious. Joy! At home, the girls rushed forward, nearly knocking Eli over with their hug. "You smell like medicine," Ava said. "Good," Eli replied. "I earned it." Amira handed him a drawing, him in a hospital bed, smiling, with a superhero cape made of tissues. That night, Garrett stood in the doorway of Eli's room, arms folded, watching his son sleep. Lilia stepped beside him. "You okay?" she asked. "I forgot what fear tasted like," he said. "Tastes like metal in your mouth. And not enough air." She nodded. "Fear is the sound of the music stopping." He turned to her. "And love is the sound of it starting again." She looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "I don't think I've ever been loved like that." "You are now." The next morning, Eli woke up asking for waffles, and the music box kept playing. Not because someone wound it, but because, somehow, love had found its rhythm again. The first warm day of spring arrived like a memory returning, unannounced but welcome. The snow melted into the edges of the porch. Birds found their voice again. Even the air seemed softer, as if the wind had learned how to exhale. Garrett stood in the backyard, hammer in hand, a handful of nails held between his teeth. Lilia stepped onto the porch in her knit slippers, squinting against the sunlight. "What are you building?" He glanced up. "You'll laugh." "Try me." "A porch altar." She blinked. "A what?" He set down the hammer and wiped his hands on his jeans. "You remember last week when the girls made that flower circle in the living room and pretended we were getting married?" "I do," she said, smiling. "You wore a crown made of yarn." "And you wore Eli's blanket like a veil," he added. "It was too short. You made it work." She laughed. "And now?" "Now," Garrett said, straightening up, "I want to make it real." Lilia stilled. Not shocked. Not afraid. Just quiet. Like something inside her had long prepared for this question. "You don't have to," he said quickly. "I mean, we're already us. You and the kids. You're already here. I just thought maybe you should be here for good, with a name that matches the mailbox, with a key that isn't borrowed." She walked down the steps slowly. "You're not proposing," she said gently. "You're inviting," he nodded. "I'm asking you to stay, properly." She looked at the half-built altar, 2 wooden posts, wildflowers in a tin bucket nearby, the porch swing swaying slightly in the breeze. Then she looked at him and smiled. Then, yes, word traveled fast. Too fast, maybe. By noon, Reverend Mason was already called. Miss Carla offered cupcakes with edible glitter, and the school's music teacher arrived with a battered keyboard. The whole neighborhood buzzed like bees around a field of permission. Garrett wore a navy button-down and jeans with a hammer loop still attached. Lilia wore a dress she'd mended by hand, soft blue with tiny stitches along the hem. The girls wove a crown of twigs and ribbons. Eli carried it like it was made of glass. The porch became their aisle. The backyard became their chapel. No seating chart, no speeches, just laughter, just breath, just love. Reverend Mason stood beneath the altar. Garrett built, clearing his throat with a grin. "Well," he said, "I've married folks in barns, bakeries, and once on a fishing boat. But this is my first porch." The guests chuckled. Garrett took Lilia's hands. "Don't need papers or traditions," he said softly. "You already made this a home. I just want to honor that in front of the people who have seen us build it." Lilia swallowed back tears. I never believed in forever, but I do believe in you. The girls stepped forward, each carrying a ribbon they tied around their hands. One for faith, one for family. Eli spoke from a little handwritten card. I now pronounce you all ours. The crowd laughed and clapped and cried. Garrett leaned in. He didn't kiss her like in movies. He pressed his forehead to hers and whispered, We're home now. That night, the house glowed. The porch light burned steady, and 5 people sat around the dining table, eating 2 sweet cupcakes and passing around a single spoon to finish the last bit of frosting. No music box, no fanfare, just the sound of belonging and the quiet joy of choosing each other. Again and again and again, spring unfolded like a letter finally opened. The grass returned. The porch swing creaked in longer, slower rhythms. A garden sprouted at the edge of the backyard. Lilia's idea, Eli's curiosity, Ava and Amira's watering can patrol. Garrett called it Operation Dirt Miracle. There were no more visits from strangers, no more hiding in doorways or tracing escape plans in her mind. The twins no longer flinched at dropped spoons. Lilia no longer held her breath when Garrett raised his voice to call Eli in from the yard. They belonged here now, not as guests, not as burdens, as family. One Saturday afternoon, Garrett walked in from the garage with dusty hands and a grin. You've got to see this, he told Lilia. She followed him across the hall into the old music room. He'd finished restoring it. No more creaky floorboards or crooked shelves. The walls were painted light gray, a soft kind that welcomed quiet. In the corner, where the old piano once sat ignored, a new one gleamed gently under the sunlight. Not fancy, but tuned, ready. Lilia stepped closer, fingertips grazing the keys. You did this? He shrugged. It needed someone to sing again. She looked at him, that slow smile of hers returning. Then sit. He did. She sat beside him, pressed a few tentative notes, then launched into a lullaby. Her voice hadn't changed. It was still soft, warm, a little trembly. But now it carried something deeper. Not survival. Peace. The door creaked open. The girls peeked in, then joined them. Ava sat cross-legged on the floor with a sketchbook. Amira laid on her stomach, humming along. Eli leaned in the doorway like he was watching a secret unfold. When Lilia finished the song, the room was silent. Garrett spoke into the hush. That was beautiful. Lilia turned to him. It wasn't perfect. Neither are we, he said. That's why it works. Later that evening, Lilia tucked the twins into bed. Ava held her usual stuffed elephant, newly patched, lovingly stitched. Amira had a paperback tucked beneath her pillow, borrowed from the school library. Neither girl needed nightlights anymore. Ava yawned. Mom? Yes, love. When do we stop calling this our new home? Lilia paused, then smiled. When? You can't remember ever being anywhere else. Downstairs, Garrett lit a single candle on the mantel. Not for loss, not for grief, for memory. He sat on the porch, mug in hand. The music box sat beside him, opened gently. Its song played, familiar. Now, a little sad, a little brave. The door opened. Lilia stepped outside in her shawl, barefoot on the wood planks. She didn't sit this time. She danced. Just a few slow steps in time with the melody. Not for an audience. For herself. Garrett watched her, something tight loosening in his chest. Then he stood, set his mug down, and joined her. They moved quietly, shoulders touching, eyes closed, the porch swing creaking gently behind them. The girls peeked through the window, giggling. Ava whispered, "He's dancing." Amira grinned, "She's happy."